Sorry, did you want to sit here? Oh, okay, I can sit here. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. How's last week of classes looking for everybody? No? Don't need to bring it up?
Yeah, just forget about that.
Let's see. So as everybody's pulling all your stuff out, getting set up, there's a lot of files for our notes to start with today. So in our week 14 folder, there's a notes.zip file that you should download and extract somewhere, and that's what we'll be working with today. And this file has, so it's got a whole Flask application inside of it that we're going to be basing stuff off of. We'll take a look at all the stuff here in a minute in detail, but it has a Twitter clone.db file, a project.py, which has all the Python that we'll be working with, and then there's 6 different HTML files in the templates. So this will save you a bunch of typing random boilerplate stuff if you download that and get it set up. While you're doing that, we'll give us a quick just highlight of your weekend. Sure, of my weekend. What did I do this weekend? So normally we try to do stuff with other family members down here, but this weekend was just a small family, me and my wife and our 2 kids. And we went to a lot of different parks. Our not yet 1-year-old Isaac, he's going to have his first birthday in February, and my wife's been trying to pick out a good park around here to have his birthday at. So we've been visiting a lot of parks lately to see that. Our main requirement is that it has to have a nice gazebo inside of it that can house a bunch of people. So I think we have one. I think we have one picked out. It's over in Upland, and so we just have to get it rented, and then she has her party games and stuff that she wants to play. Anything else anybody wants to talk about before we get started for today? We're all set up with the zip file.
Wait, when you open the zip file, is it supposed to say that it's not displayed in the editor?
So you can't open the zip file inside VS Code. You'll have to extract it using whatever zip file extractor you have on your computer. Put it somewhere, and then load VS Code into that folder. Okay, so today our second round of talking about Flask and Python. In the end, Flask is this really popular web framework. A lot of companies are using it. We saw last time that Uber, Netflix, and other giant companies like that are using Flask. And today we're going to talk about, really the goal of this week we have today and next class session is to develop a system that lets you log in and log out from a web page. And the web page is going to change its behavior depending on whether you're logged in or logged out. And if you're logged in, it will do different things depending on who you're logged in as. So in our case in particular, we'll have the ability to create messages like you do on Twitter, and it will, based on who you are logged in as, create a message from that person. In order to do this, there's sort of 4 basic topics that we'll be covering. I think these first 3 we'll get through today. There's a few more just syntax things with Jinja that we'll want to cover that will make our life easier. And then we'll spend most of today talking about these two topics right here, this idea of HTML forms and cookies. These two topics, basically what they are is a way for the web browser to communicate information back to Python, to Flask, to all of your routes. And we'll see the different situations where you'd want to use the different techniques and then put them all together into this log in, log out system. Any questions at a high level before we jump into the details? Okay, so I've got my VS Code pulled up over here, and let's just take a quick tour through what our notes zip file had. So I'm in right now looking at the project.py file, and it has some setup stuff up here. Basically, you can just ignore that. It has all your imports and things like that. We'll take a look at these helper functions here in a bit. But I guess the stuff that we've seen before are all these different routes that you're having to create a bunch of routes in your lab. So these should maybe look familiar based on that. And then this stuff at the bottom is just actually running the program when we run it. I'm going to open up a terminal and oops, let's have running somewhere else. Sorry about that. So right now I'm in my week 14 folder. I'm going to go into a notes section one folder, and then I'll post all of them. We're going to make a bunch of changes to this, and I'll post the changes after class so that if you don't catch everything, you'll be able to see it then. And then just real quickly, let's run this Python 3 project.py, and there's our stuff is running. Before we take a look at in Firefox what this is going to look like, let's just take a look at the templates over here. There are 6 templates, and we have 5 routes. So there's 1 route per template, or 1 template per route, plus this extra base.html route, which we'll take a look at in a second. Let's jump over back to Firefox. I have the web page loaded up, and if I click on home over here, then it has just a couple of messages. It's not actually loading up the database. This is just hard-coded messages in here at this point. And then there's these logout, login, create user, create message, create user, all these different routes. And you click on them, and they go to appropriate things for that, whatever that web page happens to be. And so let's jump back over here, and I want to take a look at the root route. It's always hard for me to pronounce root route. This HTML file is going to look a little bit different than maybe the one that you either have created or are creating in the process of creating for your lab. The main portion of this right here is this table that contains, I said there we had the hard-coded HTML messages this time. It's not loading from the database at all. And so for your lab, one of the things that you have to do is load this information from the database rather than have it hard-coded. But then there's also no sort of there's no menu anywhere inside of here. And if we were to look at any of these other routes, we can see that they also don't have any menu anywhere. They have these weird block things, and this extends at the top, and they all sort of look like that, all in that format. What this extends means is that every time we load up, say right now I'm on createuser.html, every time we do the render template with createuser.html, whenever Jinja hits this extends base.html, it's going to, instead of loading create user.html, it's going to pause that and go over to the base.html file. And base.html has my actual like outline of what every web page is supposed to contain inside of it. It has a little header at the top and then a body, and then here's my menu, and then down here it has this like block title and block content. Whenever this block title or block content, whenever Jinja encounters these, it's going to replace them with the corresponding location in the file that is extending base. So when I come back over to login.html, I have this block title right here, login, and then I have this block content right here that has some login information. And this block content will just get copied and pasted right here. And this block title, this right here, will get copy and pasted right here. The advantage of this is that I can have just one sort of boilerplate menu sort of layout for my whole web page, and everything is going to follow this same layout. And if I wanted to change this layout, say moving the login button to be the very last thing like this, and then I can save that, come down here, Control C, up arrow, rerun this, back over to Firefox, refresh this. Now the login's been moved to the very bottom, and it's going to be that way on every web page. So I only have to change my menu once, and it gets changed everywhere. Any questions about anything about the notes, just what they are, before we talk about how to do this login, logout system?
So can you just go over how you like the format of the block?
Yeah. So the question is exactly reviewing what the block exactly does. So right now I'm looking at base.html. And let's take also a look at we'll do root.html. Root.html at the very top says extends base.html. And whenever, and let's also take a look at project.py and look at the root route. So right here, we have render template root.html. When render template loads root.html, the first thing that it's going to see is this extends base.html. So render template is then going to go into base.html, and this is going to be the HTML that actually gets sent over to Firefox when somebody goes to the root route.
But why not just paste that into the root?
And so the question is, this seems like a little bit of extra work because I could have just put this right directly inside of the root.html, and that's totally true. But the advantage of having it as its own standalone file is now I can make changes to this menu up here. Say like, let's make create user the very first element in this list. And let's move this title up here to the very top. So the title is going to happen before the list. And I make this change just in one spot. Save that. Down here, Control C, up arrow, rerun this, back over to Firefox. Right now I'm in the logout route, so we never even looked at the logout route, but when I refresh this, the layout just changed. The H2 menu is up here at the top, and create user is now at the top. And if no matter which one of these routes I go to, it has that same format. So the advantage of having this base.html with this extends is that you get consistency between what all of your routes are doing, and that way, if you make a change, you don't have to try to remember to make the change everywhere. Yeah, good question. Yes.
Can you explain what the point of end block again?
So the question is about end block versus block. And anytime you have a block, you have to have an end block in Jinja. Just like when you have a for loop, you have to have an end for. that in Python, when we have one of these sort of control structures, so like a for loop, something like for x in xs, Python knows that the end of the for loop happens because of white space, because we indent back to the left. But Jinja doesn't know about white space. Jinja doesn't care about white space. So anytime you start something in Jinja, you have to explicitly say when the end is. So here, start and stop, here, start and stop. And then in the, say, root.html, here's the start of the title, here's the stop of the title, here's what gets copied and pasted into that title section. Here's the start of the content, here's the stop of the content, the end of it, here's what gets copied and pasted into that content section. Great questions. Okay, so there's three methods that the web browser Firefox has of communicating with Python, with our routes. And we're going to take a look at the differences between all three of these methods next. And in order to do that, inside of project.py, you can see that all of these routes are calling this function print debug info. It's just at the top of every one of these routes. And this function is defined up here in this helper function section, print debug info, and it's just printing out, it's got 6 print statements right here. Each one of these print statements is just telling us what the output of one of these things is over here. And again, because there's going to be a lot of stuff being printed, I am always telling myself exactly what is being printed on the left and on the right. That way, when I'm looking through the output down here, it's easy to find exactly what I'm looking for. And if you look at these sort of carefully, there's they can be sort of grouped into 3 different sections like this. Each one has a username and a password that they're printing. But then the first one is this request.args, then request.form, and then request.cookies. This request is different than the requests plural library that we've been using before. So request is different from requests plural. Just emphasize that S. That this is built into Flask, and this is its own separate standalone library. In order to get access to the request variable, it's something that I've added to the import up here at the top on line 5 that we're importing request. And under this request, so request basically stands for all of the stuff that Firefox has given us to tell us what web page to generate. And there's 3 different types of variables that Firefox can give us. This args, this form, or this cookies. And so we're going to take a look at how each of these works right now. Down here in this terminal, you notice that every time I visit a different web page, it prints out all of that information from right here because all of those routes call this print debug info function. Prints all these things out. So we're going to go to the web pages, manipulate things about the web pages, then come back to the terminal and see how these variables down here change. So back over here, let's go to our root route, and then we'll add this question mark, and we'll say username equals Trump and password equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've seen this a little bit. It's come up before. We've seen it before, but this question mark indicates everything after the question mark is no longer part of the route. It is technically called a query argument. And the thing to the left of an equal sign is the key, and the thing to the right of the equal sign is the value. So here we have a username key and a value of Trump, a password key and a value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to hit enter. And so here's the normal web page that I get when I click on the home, the root route. But when I come over here now, you'll see that down here in this requests.args.get, username is equal to Trump and password equals 12345. So these variables are set by the information after the question mark in the URL. Are there any questions about that?
What is args again? Like argument?
Yeah, args is short for arguments. Args equals arguments. And technically, the information after the question mark is called the query arguments. So that's why args here for short. Okay.
What's the difference between request.args.get and request.form.get?
Yeah, so you'll see down here that for request.form.get and request.cookies.get, we're not actually getting anything yet. So when we use this question mark syntax in the URL, the only thing that we get is request.args.get. And so the next one we're going to look at is this request.form.get. Before we do that though, let's just come down here and you see our URL up at the top, question mark username equals Trump and so on. I'm going to click my home route right here. And when I do that, it deletes all of those query arguments. Come down here, my username and password is now equal to none. And you can see there are no query arguments passed right here. It's just saying get slash. Up here it said get slash question mark, a whole bunch of stuff. Now it's just get slash. And so we don't have those variables at all. And so these variables, they don't stick around with us. They're just for one. These variables are just for one web page. So back over here, let's take a look at our login form over here. And now let's actually type some information into our login form. Maybe before actually typing stuff in, let's just take a look at the login.html so we can see what the form looks like. Here we have this form, action equals /login, and then method equals post. This table right here has all the information from those form elements, username, password, input, type equals text, name equals username, type equals password, name equals password, and then an input submission button down here. I'm going to start actually by changing this method to get and rerun this. And down over here, now when I type in username Trump, and we'll do password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look up at the top right now. You notice that my URL is just /login. And now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's press the login button. Don't save that. Up here now you can see that my username equals Trump and password equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up here. So the default action for a form is to put all of the information up in the URL. Sometimes this is also called a GET request, putting the information in the URL. For some things, like when you go to a Google search and you type in your Google search, you want the information in the URL so that you can then share your Google search with somebody else just by copying and pasting the URL. In this case, though, when you're working with passwords, you don't want people's passwords to appear in the URL because anybody then who's just walking past on your computer can look up at the top and see what your password is. So a long time ago, these query arguments were the first way of passing information from the browser to these routes. And then people realized we needed to have confidential information, and that's where our next system comes in at. In order to be able to pass confidential information that does not appear in the URL, you change this from method equals get to method equals post. That's one change that you have to do. We'll come down here, Control-C, rerun this and see what happens. Now come back over here, refresh this web page so that it has the new method loaded, type in Trump and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I press login, and you'll see that we get this error message saying method not allowed. When we get this error message, what's happening is in our Python file, the route that we're using, so we're on the login route right now, this one right here. By default, these routes do not accept these post methods. They only accept the get methods. In order to make it also be able to accept post, you have to say methods equals get, comma, post, like that. This modifies the route so that it says not only can you work with gets, which is the default, you can also work with post. And this post, again, comes from over in the login.html. We had method equals post right here. Question?
If you didn't have get in the methods, would that mean it was like excluding the get?
Exactly. And so by default, this is what the default is. If we did not have get, that means that you would not be able to access this URL like normally. It would have to come from a post that was issued by a web form. For the purposes of our assignment right here, you can just modify things so that they take both get and post, and that'll work. So I'm going to save this, come down here, Control C, up arrow, rerun this, back over to Firefox, refresh this. You'll notice that I get this error message. It's not really an error message, but this warning saying, in order to refresh this web page, I have to resend the information. That's the information that was sent on that post method. And now everything worked. We can verify that again. Let's just type Trump 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, press login, and there's no more error messages. And also up here at the top, there's no question mark or anything. Nobody can just be walking past my computer and see whatever it was that I typed in for the password. Yeah.
Fix the method not allowed. I'm still getting the method not allowed.
If you get a method not allowed, it means that your route needs to have this methods equals, must contain post, and also make sure that you don't forget to save it up top and then restart the web server down below. Sophia?
So when you like put in stuff in the Firefox, why does it automatically update in this like Python file? But you have to like Control C this in order for it to update the like Firefox one.
So the question is about when exactly do we have to press Control C down here? And the answer is that so Firefox is its own separate entry, and anything that we're doing with Firefox is interacting with this Python project. So we can change whatever we want just inside of Firefox, but anytime we change something in one of these files down here, basically anytime we change something within VS Code, then that's when we have to restart our project, because as soon as we do python3 project.py, that's when it opens up all the VS Code files and looks at them. And so if we need to relook at them, then we have to restart the program. Did that answer the question? Sorry?
When you include post in the login route, does that change the URL for all pages on the website? Or do you have to like manually include post for everything, for all the other pages to prevent the password from being shown?
Good question. Hold on to it. So yeah, the question was about how does post, adding this right here, interact with all the other routes that and preventing the password from being shown. And we'll see that, we'll get the full answer to that when we talk about this third method next of doing cookies, but we're not quite there yet. So yeah, it's one more time, Trump 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down here, press login, And now I want us to come look at the information that was printed down here. So previously, when we used the query arguments, we had request.args was getting our information. But now that we're using this post method, it's in this request.form.get. So coming back up here to our printing information, this information comes from a post form, and the methods for the route must include post in order to get this information. But again, this information down here is going to be just for a single web page. And as soon as I click off to a different web page, then we're no longer going to get these forms down here. So I'm going to come back over to Firefox. And now let's visit the home route. And when I do that, we come down here. We can see that the request.form.get is no longer available. Up here, it was available. And you can see here it was doing the post/login. And so that's why we have this information available up here. But now we're back to the get and the slash. And so since it's a get, there's no way that this can possibly have information inside of it. And since there's no query parameters, there's nothing in this information up here. So both of these two right here, they're only for individual web pages. So it's just going to copy and paste this exactly again. That whether you're using request.args or request.form, it's only for one web page at a time, and the information can't travel between web pages. In order to make the information actually travel between web pages, that's what this request.cookies is for. And in order to see how cookies work, it's a little bit, let's see.
Wait, is cookies have to do with like, accept cookies?
Yes, it's exactly the same thing as those pop-up banners that say, accept all the cookies on this web page. So in order to be able to create a cookie from within Firefox, you right-click, go to the inspect elements, and then there's a lot of things down here that we haven't talked about, but one of them is this storage tab over here. And the storage tab lists all the cookies that you have available for this particular web page. In order to create a cookie, there's this little plus button over here. Press the plus, and it has a name and a value as like the key value pair. I'm going to make the name of this cookie be username, and the value be Trump. And let's create another cookie with my password as password 12345. And as soon as you type in a name, Firefox will reorder these to be alphabetical, so the order might jump around on you. So now I have a password cookie at 12345 and a username cookie set equal to Trump. There's a lot of other information associated with the cookie, but we don't need to care about any of that. And now when now that I have these cookies created, you'll notice that if I visit any of these other web pages, those cookies stay created down here. They don't disappear. And if I come back over here into the terminal, we can see that these cookies are being passed all the time to all the different web pages, all the different things that I visit. So just to verify that again, let's come back over here. Let's press the login route. And here we can see that, so I just visited login, and here's my cookie that's been passed in. If I wanted to delete the cookie inside of Firefox over here, I can just press the delete button, and it deletes those cookies. Yeah, so from a technical perspective, I was just asked about like those pop-up banners that ask about, do you want to accept cookies or not accept cookies? all of that is happening within your own web browser, and so it's something that you actually have control of, no matter what buttons you press on that pop-up banner. And actually, if you use the uBlock Origin extension, no matter what button you press, it's going to block all of the advertisement cookies and delete those for you automatically. And it'll only keep the cookies necessary for actually like logging into a web page. So those are the three methods that web pages have of sort of changing the behavior of a route by passing in variables to the route. And again, the get method is visible to the user inside of the URL. The post method or the form is not visible to the user, but it's only available for one particular web page. And cookies also not visible to the user, and but it passes along for all the different web pages. Any questions about the difference between those three things? Okay, then what we're going to do next is put all of those together in order to build our login system. And let me, before I forget, just say that, so these variables pass between different web pages. Sometimes we would say that these variables are persistent, whereas the other variables are ephemeral, which is almost certainly not spelled correctly. Just ephemeral, they're just out there, wisp of variableness that get blown away by the breeze as soon as you change. Yes, Lauren.
When I open my page to inspect the cookies, I have one called AI user there. Is that concerning?
Let's see. So different things that can create cookies. If you have extensions installed, those could create cookies. A hacker could. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure what would have caused that. My guess is that you have an extension installed that did that, or I don't know. Cookies are specific to individual web pages, so in particular to individual hosts. So the stuff to the left of the first slash is the host. And so if we went to a different host, so if we went to like github.com, you would see your cookies specific for GitHub that have like your like login details and things for GitHub. So it's not like a different web page could not have created that cookie for it. It had to have somehow been created on this particular web page, which you probably didn't do. The only other thing that's able to create cookies are extensions to Firefox, which can modify Firefox in arbitrary ways. So maybe they could have.
If we have like multiple of the same, like 2 passwords.
Question is, what if we have multiple of the same, and then Python will get confused. I'm not sure if Firefox will let us. Yeah, so it doesn't. Firefox doesn't even let us because of that problem. Good question.
Every time you put in like the username and password, like whether it's from your laptop or someone else's, can you see their username and password through the request.argsget, or is that only from like if you're the one who made it on your computer?
So all of this information in these variables is specific to one web browser, one Firefox has sent all of these 3 pieces of information with one request. So if there were multiple people using this web page at the same time, then they would not be able to like interact with each other through these variables.
So you can't see their username or password through the request.
So Python, because Python has access to all the information that all of the different Firefoxes are sending to Python, it can see all that information one at a time. That each one of these functions will be called just once, with these particular values specified by whatever's appropriate to the web browser that accessed it. But somebody else's web browser would not have access to like the cookies from other people.
But wouldn't it be like a privacy thing if we're still able to see what they're putting in?
So the only person who can see what's being put in is the person who owns project.py, the person who owns the web page.
Yeah.
And so they're the people who need that information. The other Firefoxes, the other web browsers, the other people connecting to the web page can't see it. Only the owner of the web page can see it.
Oh.
And so, yeah, it's true that anytime that you go to github.com and type in your password, anybody who works at GitHub, if they had access to GitHub's Flask file, would be able to see everybody's username and password.
Are they allowed to do that?
So at tech companies like GitHub, Facebook, all these sorts of companies, it would be only the CTO of the company has the sort of authority to actually log into the web page. And
How many times a week do you think they do that for like a month?
So Reddit has had a handful of famous incidents where the founders of Reddit have gone in and done that to people. And
Just looked at their passwords for them? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, that kind of thing. The other companies have much better procedures in place. And so it's actually the case that at, say, like Facebook, even the CTO, if they wanted to know your password, it's set up so it's impossible, physically impossible for them to figure out what your password is. And we're not going into like cryptography stuff in this class, but technically all the passwords at these major companies are going to be encrypted so that if the database somehow did get leaked, like the Ashley Madison database, then still nobody would be able to have access to the passwords.
On GitHub, when I'm creating a password, you use this password on many sites and all that. How does that happen?
Yeah, so sometimes you'll get an error, like a warning saying that this password has been used on other web pages. And so there's been, like we had that lab before about the Ashley Madison leak. If you look at that same GitHub repository, there's maybe 100 or 200 different web pages, major web pages that have had all their user accounts leaked and passwords leaked. And those web pages were not following the sort of the best practices cryptographically for storing those web pages. And so when their database got leaked, everybody had access to those passwords. And now all of the major sort of tech companies will automatically scan those password lists and warn you if you're using one of those passwords. But they don't have direct access to like Facebook or any of these other companies' passwords. It's just from data breaches that have happened.
You mentioned that Facebook's passwords are encrypted, but wasn't Ashley Madison's passwords also encrypted?
Ashley Madison's were not encrypted.
Oh, you weren't?
Well, they did it incorrectly. So in the original leak, it was just something called password hashes that were leaked, but they didn't add something called a salt to the password hashes, and they used a relatively old hashing algorithm, and so people were able to undo that encryption process and recover the original passwords. Okay, all good questions, but we should press on. So in our login route, what we need to do is somehow process the information that has been given to us and log us in. The idea of performing a login, the basic idea is that we will get the information from the post request, and if it's correct, set some cookies. And with those cookies are going to determine what is logged in or not logged in. And then, so we can always check using cookies to determine whether someone is logged in or not. So previously, when we were in Firefox, and we were coming down here and manually setting these cookies down to like username, Trump, and password, whatever. This was like the sort of manually setting the cookies. We want Firefox, or we want Python, we want Flask to automatically set these cookies for us if the username and password if the username and password is correct. So before talking about how to set these cookies, let's talk about actually using these cookies to modify our page based on whether somebody's logged in or not logged in. So we have a username, password, and say the password 12345, like that. And we'll come back over here. And what I want to do before we think about our login route is let's think about our root route. We want to modify the behavior of this route depending on whether the user is logged in. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called is logged in, and we'll start off with that variable being equal to true. And I'm going to pass that variable to the render template function, because the render template function is going to control the behavior of our web page and what it looks like. And so before I figure out exactly how to set this variable to be true or false, I'm first going to just manually is logged in equals is logged in, like that. I'm first going to manually set this to different values, and so that we can just manually control what's going on with the page, and then we'll set this automatically later once we've decided that we like what it looks like when we do it manually. So we pass this is logged in into the render template on the root.html, and I want to modify the behavior of this web page based on whether the person is logged in or not. And in particular, what I want to modify is our menu. That if somebody is logged in, then we do not want to continue showing them the login button. So let's come up here. If somebody is logged in, so if is logged in, like this, then if somebody's logged in, we could maybe show them the log out and create message button. But if somebody is not logged in, we would want to show them the login and the create user button. So only display this stuff if the person is logged in, only display this stuff if the person is not logged in. Save that. Come down here, Control-C, up arrow, rerun it, back over to Firefox real quick, visit our root route, and now we can see up here that it's showing home and logout and create message because I specified over here in project.py, I said is logged in equals true. So because I manually specified this equals true, then that's what it's doing. If I change this to false, like that, false, down here, Control-C, up arrow, rerun this, back over to Firefox, refresh. Now it's changing what's in the menu up here to be the appropriate things for somebody who's not logged in, being able to log in or creating a user. And so now the question is, how do we actually set this variable to an appropriate value? Maybe before talking about how to set this, is there any questions about what this is doing, how it's interacting with the Jinja?
Can you go back to the basic
Yeah, so it's just an ifs, else, and if with the things inside of the different blocks appropriate for whether somebody is logged in. If you're logged in, then you can log out or create a message. If you're not logged in, you can't log out. And if you're not logged in, then you can't create a message. But if you are not logged in, then you are able to either log in or create a new user. Okay, so how do we set this variable correctly? We're going to use this, this other helper function is valid login in order to do that for us. And the first thing that you might try to do is say, well, let me just, rather than typing it out, I'll copy and paste. We have this information up here about getting the information from the cookies. So let's copy that. Right here. And we can say username equals request.cookies.get username. And password equals password, like this. And we want our is logged in to be the result of this is valid login. The is valid login function, it takes 3 parameters. The first one is a connection to a database, then the username and the password. And then it does a select statement right here, looking up, is there a particular user with that particular password somewhere inside the users table of the database? If there is, then, well, if there is not, then we will get no rows returned from our SQL statement, so we'll return false. If there is, then we will get more than 0 rows returned, and so we will return true. So down here, under is logged in, we'll say is valid login, and then I need a connection, which I'll define in a second, username and password, like that. And my connection, I'll define that at the top of the route, connection equals SQLite3.connect, same as we had before, args.db_file, which is, again, this right here is going to be, as a default, the twitterclone.db file. So we'll be opening up twitterclone.db in order to log in, in order to check the login. Any questions about any of those lines? Yep.
Do we not have to change the thing that you have in return? Is logged in equals logged in? Do we not have to add anything else?
So this is logged in variable right here is going to correspond to this right here. And this will be true if the username and password are correct, or it'll be false if they're not correct. I don't think we'll have to change anything on this line here. Let's see, so the one thing that we will have to do is we're gonna have to find out what Trump's actual password is. I've been typing in 12345, but I don't think that's his actual password. So let's come over here, SQLite3 onto my twitterclone.db down here. We'll do a quick select star from users so that I can see all the usernames and password. And so here's the Trump username, and his password is I am Trump, all uppercase. And so that's what we'll need to type in as the password. A question?
So what do you call the function free arguments, the pronoun any variable?
No, the connection argument is the result of SQLite3.connect. It is a connection to the database. Okay, so I'm going to come back over to Firefox, and we're going to type in Trump's login credentials manually in Firefox, and hopefully this will cause our web page's behavior to change depending on whether I get those credentials correct or not. So come back over here, and let's refresh this page right now. And right now we have incorrect credentials because this password right here is incorrect. This password is 12345, but the password should be I am Trump. Because these credentials right here are incorrect, we are not successfully logged in, and it's giving us the message, the menus for people who are not logged in. If I change this now, let's do I am Trump, all uppercase. And when I change these values, in order to have them take effect, I'll have to refresh the web page, and now you can see that the menu has changed. We are, in fact, logged in at this point, and it's saying log out and create messages, two appropriate things for somebody who's logged in. I'm going to log us out again. By this time, I'll just go ahead and delete these. So now we definitely cannot be logged in because there's no cookies here storing our login information. And now when I refresh this up here again, it shows me the not logged in, logged out version of the menu. Any questions about that? That's probably the key hardest thing about creating the login system is understanding how these cookies right here are reflecting whether somebody is logged in or logged out. Yeah.
Are you gonna have to manually now create 2 new cookies, or does our code automatically create cookies?
Yeah, so it's a great question. The question is now, how do we actually get these cookies created? That when we click on the login route over here, what we want to have happen at this point is that when we type in some valid login, so if we did, this is an invalid login, if we did that, then we would not want to have those cookies created because they're not valid for logging in. But if we did type in something that was valid, like Trump and I am Trump, you can't see that, but that's what's there, then we would want that to automatically create these cookies for us so that now the person will be logged in no matter what other buttons they press. And so we'll see how to do that next. So back over here in the login route, what we need to do is we need to check, has information been passed to this route yet? And in order to check if information's been passed to this route, I'm going to come up here to our request.form.getLines. Let's copy those. And back down here, we'll paste those here. I'll call this form underscore username and form underscore password, like that. And if these things exist, then that means that somebody has pressed a button on their form and have sent us the information. So form, we'll do a quick print of form underscore username equals, comma, form underscore username, and print form underscore password equals, comma, form underscore password. And I'm also going to create another variable down here of saying has clicked form equals form underscore username is not none. And we'll print has clicked form equals, comma, has clicked form, like that. I'm gonna, since I've made my changes up here, I have to restart my web server, Control C down here, up arrow, rerun it. And now I'm gonna, in a second, head back over to Firefox. And what we're going to do is we're going to see that when we first visit this web page, that these variables right here do not exist. These variables right here, they only exist when they're passed in from a form. And when we first visit this web page, we'll get it by clicking on a link, so not from a form, and so they won't exist. These values right here will be displayed as none, and since form user is none, we'll get has clicked form equals to false. Then we'll try actually using the form, getting some values in here, and seeing that has clicked form should change to true. So let's come back over here. I'm going to click on my login route, back over here. clicked on my login route, you can see here's all of the debug information up at the top. And then here's my form specific or route specific information. My form username is none, form password is none, and has clicked form is false because I got to this page by clicking on the link rather than submitting the form. Now when I come over here and I'm just gonna type in some gibberish into these values right here, press login, don't save, back over here. Now you can see that this information has stuff inside of it and has clicked form is equal to true. So I can know whether somebody has, in fact, clicked on the form or not clicked on the form based on this code right here. And so if somebody has clicked on the form, if someone has clicked on the form and the form information is correct, then we should set the cookies. If someone has clicked on the form and the form information is wrong, then we don't want to set the cookies, we want to display an error message. We should display an error. And if someone has not clicked on the form, then we do exactly what we've been doing. So basically just render template, do nothing. Do nothing special. So and we're gonna, in order to do this, we're going to basically work backwards since we've already sort of started here. And so we'll have if has clicked form, then these three things will go inside of there. And we'll start by just doing nothing right here. And then an else statement right here. Else, they haven't clicked on the form, so we'll just do this render template like we've been doing. If someone has clicked on the form and the information is correct, so somehow we need to have a variable. We need a variable that the login information is correct. Login info correct. And we've seen how to check if the login information is correct up here. In our root route, we were doing that with cookie login information, but now we're going to do that with the form login information. We can still use the same isValid login function. We'll just pass in different values for the username and password based on forms instead of cookies. So isValid login right here with the username and password. Up here, I called it form username and form password. So we'll change that to form username and form password. And then I need another connection because I don't have a connection yet in this route. So I'm just going to come up and copy and paste this connection right here, right there. And now this variable should contain whether the information they typed into the form is correct or incorrect. So, what did I press? We want if login info correct, then we'll do this stuff right here. And we'll start by just passing. Else, they typed something into the form, but it was not a correct information, and so we need to somehow display an error message. Yes, LT.
Where did you copy and paste the con into?
The con is the connection to our SQLite file, which was the first line of the root route. So now in all of these where I have pass, I'm going to add it, change it to the return, so that they're all basically doing the same thing at this point. And I'm just going to have to modify some of the code in here so that we render the login.html differently depending on each of these options. Any other questions before we see how to modify for each of these if statements? Okay, so the basic idea is that we're going to have to do the same sort of procedure that we did for the base.html, adding these if statements, controlling what gets displayed. We'll do that into the login.html for each of these different situations. So here in this situation, what I want to do is display an error message. So I'll say display error equals true. And then over in login.html, I need to have an if statement that will display an error message for me. So maybe up here at the top, we'll say if, what did I call the variable? Display error. If display error, and if, then down here, let's say invalid username / password, and let's put that inside of a p tag, like that. And so this information, since it's inside of an if statement, will only get displayed if this display error is true. The display error is only going to get true if we, through all of these if statements, we come down to this spot right here, where if someone has in fact clicked on the form, but the information in the form is wrong, then we get the display error is true. Let's come down here, Control C, up arrow, rerun, back over here. Let's press home, back to login, close this so we can see everything. Here, my username, we'll just type in some gibberish again. Definitely doesn't exist. Press login, and now I'm getting this error message right here, invalid username and password. If I just press on this login button like this, then we haven't submitted any information on the form when I click this button, so there's no error message. But when I type in information down here, not a valid user, so I try to log in, but I get this invalid username password displayed. And again, I did the display error right here on the render template, and we're only displaying that error message if display error is actually there. Question is, where did I define display error?
Yeah.
Back over here in project.html, here's where display error is defined. Display error right here is being set equals to true. So when render template calls login.html, whenever it sees display error inside login.html, it's going to substitute the value of display error here, which is true. Could maybe make this just a little bit nicer by adding a little style, saying something like color : red, something like that, that an error message probably should be jumping out to people, lots of little alarm bells. And so now when I come over here, refresh this, resend that, now it's our error message is in red. Maybe a little bit nicer that way. But now, sort of the main route up here, what to do if the login information is correct. And so the first thing that I want to do is, let's go into Firefox. I'll type in, so Trump, I am Trump. I think that's the correct password. We can't see it though, but I press login, and you can see that there's no error message up here. So I must have typed that in correctly. But what we need to have happen is, or what we want to have happen is to set those cookies so that it follows us around on all the other pages that we visit. And setting cookies is a mildly complicated process. There's a function called make response, like this. response equals make response of render template, and then return of response. So technically what render template does is it just returns a string. And so this make response converts the string into what actually gets sent to Firefox, which is the HTML plus any cookies that you want. In order to set those cookies, it's now response.set_cookie, and then the name of the cookie, so username, and then form username, and response.set_cookie of password and form underscore password, like that. So it's complicated because we have to do, we're not just returning render template anymore. We have to call make response on render template and set cookie on the result of make response. Here we're getting this make response variable is undefined because it needs to be imported up at the top. So let's add make response like that, and then that squiggly line should go away. Where's the code? There it is. So now, with this new code, I should be able to, if I type in the username and password correctly, I should be able to, as soon as I do that, it will give me the, set my cookies for me so I can visit the other web pages, and the cookies will remain there, and everything will work nicely. So let's visit the login page, type Trump, and let's also bring up my storage over here. So we can see there's no cookies set right now. I say, I am Trump, login, and now my cookies are set. And no matter which other web page I visit, they remain set. So I just went to my route, and it understands that I am still logged in like this. Press the logout button. You see that the logout button doesn't actually work. In order for us to log out, we have to delete these cookies. And so that's the last thing that we need to talk about, is how do you delete a cookie that's been set. And so I'm going to copy and paste this right here, copy and paste this code that is setting the cookie, come down to my log out route down here, paste that there. So I'll just comment out this line. This is the line that we used to have. And this is what we have now, log out here. So we're going to set these to empty strings. This doesn't technically delete the cookie though. It just changes the value of the cookie to be nothing. In order to delete the cookie, expires equals 0, expires equals 0. Anytime you set a cookie, you can set an expiration date for the cookie when it's going to automatically be deleted. And this number over here is in seconds. So it will automatically be deleted 0 seconds after Firefox loads the web page. And so it will delete the cookie for us. Now, if I save this, come down here, Control C, come over here. So I have to rerun this. Come up here. Here's my main web page. So I still have my cookies down here. I am Trump, press the logout button, and now my cookies are deleted. So now I am no longer logged in. And now I visit back to the root route and shows that I'm not logged in. Yes? In order to make the make response not underlined, you have to import it from Flask up at the top, adding the make response to the import. Going back where?
Yeah, to login info.
See, so this is everything that you need to have your logging in and logging out on your web page. And at this point, we've covered everything that you'll need for everything you'll need for the assignment. Next class, we'll go over the exact details of the assignment and submission and all of those details. We'll also talk about this thing called SQL injection and how to make your web page immune to this attack. For maybe one last thing about logging in and logging out. If we go back up to our root route, you can see that we had this check here to see that if we're logged in and passing this is logged in over to root.html. In order for your all of your routes to know whether you're logged in or not, you'll have to do this same procedure in all of the routes. So right now, if I come over to, say, the create user route or the login route, they don't know whether I'm logged in or logged out. Only the home route does, only the root route. And so you'll have to add that same code to every route. That's it for today. Happy to stick around and answer questions if people have them about this. And again, all of this code will be uploaded to GitHub right after class. So you'll be able to access it if there was maybe something that you weren't able to copy down in time. Otherwise, I'll see you all on Wednesday. Sure.
Do you mind explaining? I still don't understand what cookies are and why.